basically, I did the peace movement in the 1960s, which was kind of what was going on in America at the time of the Vietnam War. And basically it was a way for citizens to protest the government about their opinion on the war. And the reason why they did this was just because a lot of people did not feel that they supported the war. They didn't have a right or wrong reason. Like if you look back to World War II, it was actually a threat to the United States. You had Japan on one side, you had Germany on the other side, but Vietnam was kind of like the U.S. was kind of bullying up on North Vietnam. They're kind of teaming up with South Vietnam, and the whole entire political situation, a lot of people didn't feel was right. They kind of felt like they should keep their business away from it. And on top of that, the government was also, in the beginning, lying to the citizens about how many people were over there and their actual total involvement inside of Vietnam. Vietnam was more of, it kind of took place from about the mid-60s till about the early 70s, and what happened was they started sending troops over. I would say 1963 to 1964 is when you started seeing a lot more troops going over. A lot of people didn't know about this because the government tried to keep it hidden, but a lot of people did know about it as well. So what they started to do is start protesting the government. The first actual protest was in 1962. Sam Marcy was the one that started it, and he was the starter of the WWP. Also, you started seeing other anti-war things popping up. I'm sure you guys all heard of the Black Panther Party. That was a group that felt that they had to protest for equality for minorities, and basically at the beginning of the war, Vietnam, they actually started drafting people that were not going to college. So that was mainly minorities. So you actually saw a lot more minorities going over than whites, and they felt this was a lot of inequality. So they started fighting for that, and that's when you started seeing groups like this pop up. And I'm sure you guys have also heard of hippies, and that was just a term given to people that were protesting the war and kind of had a bad name for themselves because they like to do a lot of drugs and everything else. I'm sure you guys have seen. And the reason why they did this is they felt that it was like mind expanding, and they felt that it would give them other ideas and helped them to maintain inner peace and all kinds of other stuff. When I would ask my dad about, what was the general opinion of like hippies, he would just kind of quote like what my grandfather would say about, he just would start, well, I can't really say this, but as far as curse words go, there was a lot of curse words, and a lot of people looked down on him because you would kind of get groups of them coming and going, and they kind of give a bad image. Whenever you go on the news, you would see hippies, and they'd be doing all kinds of stuff that wasn't right for the generation, and it would be kind of, rebellious in a way. What happened then is as the protests started getting bigger, this picture is from what's called the March on Washington, which was the largest protest inside the movement, and this got them national recognition. Anywhere between 15 to 2,500,000 people showed up in Washington to protest, and this was on April 17th, 1965, and this was basically the turning point for the peace movement. They decided to go actually right up to the government's door basically and say, hey, we don't support the war at all, what are you guys doing, this, and that. And this was another famous picture you guys have probably seen in history class, and this was basically a guy putting the Yeezys down the barrels of the National Guard that came in to help control the crowd. And this was very symbolic in the fact that he said, anti-war, like it screamed this, because then this got sent across the country in newspapers and any kind of journalism that was going on at the time. And then on top of that, the whole entire country also got very erupted when outcome of Watergate started. When the investigation went through that was a whole big ordeal as well, because it basically uncovered everything that was going on in Vietnam at the time, and the fact that the government was trying to cover it up was the bad part. I'm sure you guys have learned probably in American history, I want to say in high school, about Watergate, but basically President Nixon tried to cover up what was going on in Vietnam. He had documents, and he had counting about how many soldiers were over there, how much money was being spent, and he basically hired people to go in and break in and try to steal the files, but then they got caught by their own guards inside the Watergate building, and this was kind of very embarrassing. It eventually led to Nixon's resign. This is when Gerald Ford took over at the time of the presidency, and this was kind of very embarrassing for Nixon at the time, just because, it's like you're trying to cover something up, and obviously everybody knows what's going on, and that just made the protest all the more less subtle, I guess you could say. Um, and then after that, what started happening was you started seeing people coming back from the war, and as the U.S. started pulling out of Vietnam, you would start seeing people come back from the war veterans and whatnot. And I'm sure you've heard of John Kerry, the Senator John Kerry. He came back and actually protested in front of Congress about what he's actually seen over in Vietnam. And he decided to kind of join the protest. But then other soldiers came back and claimed that they found inner peace in themselves, knowing that they served their country, which is a whole different way of thinking about peace. You kind of think peace being anti-war, but other people felt that they were peaceful in themselves and serving their country. So this was a whole different aspect that kind of opened people's eyes up to the aspect of what they were protesting for. And then by the end of that, they also started realizing that the government was kind of going to do what it was going to do. And by 1973, the U.S. started signing the peace accords, and it basically pulled the soldiers out of Vietnam, but it didn't totally end the involvement in Vietnam. And they basically still gave support to South Vietnam. They still continued to bomb North Vietnam, but they didn't have any soldiers in the war at the time. So whether or not the peace movement was successful or whether it wasn't is very contradictory. If you ask one person, they're going to say it was because they were able to pull soldiers out, and that's the reason why they were protesting. But at the same time, it didn't bring total peace. So however you guys want to take it, depends who you ask. It's very open opinion still, but you guys can take it however you like as far as whether or not you believe it was successful or not.